Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. He knocked the fork from my hand, calories already counted. I caught it midair and felt the edge bite my palm. Our newborn hiccuped in her wrap, startled by the slap of metal. His eyes slid to my stomach, then to the trash. I set the fork down slowly and chose silence that cut. I'm Mara, 29, and I learned to breathe in pieces. Short pulls when he hovered, longer pulls when he smirked. Control came dressed as concern, always neat, always timed. My pulse tapped a metronome I couldn't ignore. Something dark gathered under the ordinary, waiting to break. He opened the calorie app and tilted the screen toward me. 200 over, he muttered, tapping the red number hard. I wiped milk from my shirt with the back of my wrist. The baby rooted and fussed, hunting for comfort I still had. He angled the phone at her like proof would shame us both. Walk now, he reached for the stroller without looking. I tightened the wrap and drew her closer to my chest. My stitches pinched when I stood, a clean knife failing. The hallway creaked like a warning, one step, then two. I counted my breaths and saved my anger for later. Outside, he set a pace I wasn't meant to hold. I trailed by 2 strides, heartbeat kicking at my throat. He checked his watch and called the time like a coach. I stayed with him anyway because quitting fed him more. Somewhere a dog barked and my daughter flinched against me. At the corner, he blocked my path with a light touch. Picture time, he lifted his phone and framed my belly. I raised a hand and saw the tremor I hated. He clicked anyway, a quick burst, face pleasant for strangers. I smiled back at the lens and filed away the date. Back home, he weighed the bottle like a pharmacist. Exact ounces matter, he lined the nipple with the counter edge. I measured my tone instead of the formula. His jaw flexed when I did it my way anyway. The baby latched and settled, choosing a side without asking. He grabbed my gym bag and dug for the membership card. You start classes Monday, he tucked the card under a magnet. I tasted metal under my tongue and didn't spit. His reflection in the microwave watched me choose. I drew a smile across my face and moved the card. The group chat on his phone pinged from the table. A bubble preview flashed my photo with 3 thumbs. Back at it, someone wrote, followed by a flex emoji. He chuckled and turned the phone face down, casual. My throat went tight, then colder than I expected. I texted my sister 2 words, night ears. She answered with a heart and a time, 7. He watched my thumbs and leaned on the doorframe. Family meeting again, he tried for lightness and missed. I tucked the phone away and memorized his tells. Dinner turned into a rule sheet, taped where reminders live. Protein steps, water, repeat, red circles for failure. He handed me a marker like a gift. I uncapped it, drew a clean line through his columns. He smiled without teeth and told me to be practical. The baby cried from the bedroom, sharp and impatient. I moved first, he drifted behind me like a shadow. She quieted when I lifted her, breaths easing into mine. He hovered long enough to look involved, then drifted back. Her warmth worked like proof that I wasn't broken. He came back with a bathroom scale tucked under his arm. Let us be accountable, he placed it center stage. I stepped on because refusal became fuel for taunts. The number blinked, then fixed, just a fact on plastic. He wrote it on the rule sheet with a satisfied nod. My hand found the pen and pressed too hard. Ink bled into the paper, spidering across his grid. He watched the spreading stain and went still. A thin smile lifted his mouth like a dare. I smiled back with something I hadn't used yet. Tomorrow morning, he announced, tapping the scale again. Earlier than today, he set his alarm and lifted his chin. I tucked the baby down and smoothed her tiny fist. He opened the bedroom window to let the night in. Cold air touched my face and a plan touched my ribs. He fell asleep fast, breath heavy, blanket kicked low. I counted his inhales until I trusted the rhythm. The apartment settled, pipes ticking, distant elevator groaning. I slid the rule sheet free and folded it twice. The marker slipped into my hoodie pocket like a key. In the bathroom, my reflection looked like a stranger who'd warned me. I traced the red line with my fingertip and considered erasing it. Instead, I wrote one word behind the mirror, tiny and sharp. Drop. Not pounds, something heavier I couldn't drag one more day. His alarm drilled the dark and his hand hit my shoulder. Up, he pulled the blanket hard and pointed to the doorway. I swung my legs over the edge and felt the sting return. My plan from last night hummed under my ribs like a live wire. He marched to the kitchen and clattered through drawers on purpose. Let's measure progress. He planted a smug grin and opened the fridge. I strapped the baby to my chest and steadied my breath. He stared until I moved faster than I wanted to move. Shoes on, he tossed mine toward the hallway and waited. I slipped them on without socks and tightened the wrap. He lifted his phone and angled it at my stomach again. I raised my chin and met the lens like a dare. The elevator groaned to a stop and the doors peeled open. He stepped in first and took the front corner like a guard. I stood behind him and watched our reflections breathe in sync. The baby wriggled and I whispered hush into her hairline. We hit the lobby and he set a brutal pace. Keep up, he didn't look back once during the first block. I matched him because quitting here would hand him ammunition. A cyclist swerved near the stroller and cursed loud enough to bruise. At the park loop he jogged without asking if I could. He timed my steps with exaggerated taps on his watch face. I counted to 50 and refused to look tired for him. A cramp grabbed low and hot and I kept moving anyway. Water, he tossed me a bottle like a coach on a sideline. I caught it and didn't drink to spite his script. He smirked at that tiny victory and picked up the pace. I saved the swallow for the moment he turned away. On the last stretch he slowed and blocked the path with a palm. Photos for accountability, he reached out as if to help. I stepped around him and kept walking with measured calm. He followed close enough that our steps tangled and snapped apart. Back upstairs he logged numbers with a neat finger while I fed her. Consistency makes character, he looked pleased with his own wisdom. I watched the baby's eyelids flutter as her breathing settled. My patience clicked into place like a seatbelt ready for impact. The oven timer beeped, though we hadn't set anything at all. He frowned at the noise like a judge weighing a case. I used the sound to slip my phone from my pocket. A quick photo caught his back and the tense curve of his neck. Protein now, he slid a plastic container across the counter. I wrapped both hands around a mug instead and waited. Steam rose and fogged my lashes and cleared just as fast. He drummed his fingers until the rhythm got under my skin. I'm meeting my sister later, I aimed it flat and steady. He leaned against the doorframe and adopted that casual lean again. Group therapy, he scoffed, then forced a grin that didn't hold. 7, I added, because honesty would make the later lie cleaner. He collected dirty plates that weren't dirty and rattled them anyway. That time clashes with our schedule, he opened a calendar app dramatically. I stayed silent long enough to remind him he wasn't a boss. He laughed once and sharpened the tone he used for rules. He pinned a new chart where the old one used to hang. Fresh categories showed up like traps with friendly names. He offered me a marker with 2 fingers and a raised eyebrow. I touched his wrist with mine and didn't take it. We're doing this together, he placed the marker on my side. I squeezed my hand into a fist until my knuckles ached. The baby hiccuped once and then 2 more times in a row. I loosened and felt the tremor slide out through my fingertips. He wheeled the stroller to the door like a prop for a commercial. Errands, he lifted his jacket and checked his hair in the microwave. I texted my sister once more with a single punctuation mark. She double-tapped the message and I felt my chest lighten. In the hallway he held the stroller by the handle too tight. A neighbor stepped out and nodded at us with a small smile. First month is a blur, her voice carried the weight of experience. He gave a charming answer and then squeezed the handle harder. Outside the pharmacy he stopped and lifted the stroller into shadow. Before and after, he said, already posing for his own story. I angled my body to shield the baby and the lens. He frowned when the shot failed and tried to reposition us. A car rolled by and splashed through a deep puddle near the curb. Water spotted his jacket and he cursed under his breath. I didn't move at all and just waited for the shift. He shoved his phone into his pocket and waved me ahead. We reached the corner and the walk signal blinked red twice. He stepped off early and forced me to follow halfway. A horn blasted close and heat flooded my scalp. I jerked back and he laughed like danger was a joke. Back in our building, he paused at the tenant board and scanned notices. Gym closed for maintenance, he read, disappointed by the disruption. I kept my face smooth and let the surprise work in my favor. A small plan inside me stretched its legs and looked around. Up in the apartment, he ducked into the bedroom for clean clothes. I slid the new chart into a drawer and closed it softly. The marker from last night sat warm in my hoodie pocket. I tucked it under a stack of burp cloths for later. He reappeared and jerked his chin at the door without speaking. Groceries, he locked eyes with me until I grabbed the diaper bag. I checked the baby's straps and touched her tiny toes once. He impatiently jangled the keys like I was already late. In the store, he tracked items on his phone with obsessive focus. I kept to my list and refused to chase his pace. A clerk offered a hand with the stroller and nodded at my wrist. A faint bruise splayed there and the clerk's eyes held mine. At checkout, he tapped the display and lectured about cost again. I swiped my own card before he could make it a lesson. His jaw clicked and he stuffed the receipt into his pocket. I noted the pocket out of habit and filed the detail. The clouds outside thickened as wind pushed down the street hard. He glanced up and urged me to move faster toward home. I slowed instead and watched him pretend patience for one beat. He stalked ahead and didn't notice when I paused at the corner. I snapped a quick shot of the lobby camera on the ceiling. The feed light blinked twice like it recognized me at last. Proof was a ladder and I was stacking the rungs. A thought landed hard, this pile would hold my weight soon. Upstairs, he went to the bathroom and turned on the faucet. I slipped the diaper bag behind the couch and removed $50 in cash. 2 bills slid into the small pocket sewn inside the wrap. My breath steadied and my hands finally did what my head needed. He emerged with damp hair and that fresh, reset attitude. Nap for her, then your circuit, he pointed at the living room. I laid the baby down and rubbed small circles along her back. He lined in the doorway and started counting like a referee. I sank into the first squat and kept my face neutral. My legs shook and heat built through the underside of my skin. He watched for failure and didn't get it yet. On 10, my phone buzzed and I let it ring. Who keeps calling? His tone sharpened like a blade drawn quick. Spam. I wiped my palms and held his stare until he blinked. He looked away first and chuckled without humor at nothing. I felt that too because power changes shape when watched. On the floor, I felt a stitch threaten to open again. I paused long enough to breathe through it without collapsing. He clapped twice like a coach who never played the sport. I stood up and tasted iron and kept my mouth closed. Run the stairs, he gestured toward the hallway like a general. I stepped out and let the door shut softly behind me. Instead of climbing, I texted my sister a simple go. She answered with now and my heart pivoted toward exit. I descended 1 level and then another for rhythm. In the quiet stairwell, I recorded a voice memo fast. Today, morning loop, street near pharmacy, chart moved. My whisper shook once and then steadied like I'd trained for this. Back inside, he met me with a stopwatch lifted high. Slower than earlier, he tapped the screen with theatrical disappointment. I glanced at the baby and then at the kitchen drawer. He followed my look and his expression cooled to frost. He reached the drawer first and found nothing but utensils. I stood still and let silence press against his chest. It was here, he dug deeper like the paper might grow legs. I leaned on the counter and watched him run out of bluster. He straightened and placed his palms flat as if on a pulpit. Honesty now, he waited for me to volunteer my surrender. I let the pause stretch until the baby rustled and whimpered. He stepped back like the sound burned and the moment snapped. I'll be late tonight, I spoke without wobble and kept it clean. New class, he scratched his jaw and pretended to be excited. 7 to 9, I confirmed the lie and met his eyes without blinking. He nodded and looked relieved that he'd get his evening free. I lifted the baby and felt her tiny weight deepen against me. He reached to adjust the strap and I shifted out of reach. Something mean flashed through his face and then vanished. I smiled like a mirror and let him see nothing useful. When the afternoon settled, he left to run another lap outside. The door closed and the lock clicked harder than usual. I stood still and listened for footsteps fading down the hall. My pulse answered with a steady drumbeat and then a plan. The door clicked sooner than expected and his shoes scraped tile. I swept the cash deeper into the wrap and straightened. He scanned the room like a guard checking cells. My throat dried once, then settled into steel. Change of plans, he tossed his jacket and reached for the stroller. I blocked with a hip and kept my voice level. She's sleeping, I tapped the wrap and eased 2 steps back. His mouth pulled tight and the room shrank by inches. He held up his phone. Quick check, then circuits. His finger hovered over the fitness app. I lifted my arm like a boxer and offered my wrist. He switched to the scale icon and smiled without warmth. The buzzer jolted us both and I moved Phi. Arrest the package, I called, already crossing the floor. He followed close enough to shadow my ankles. I cracked the door and saw my sister's eyes. Wrong unit, she chirped, bright and harmless. Her hand brushed mine and left a folded receipt. I slid it into my sleeve and widened the gap. He lingered behind me, pretending patience while counting seconds. She brought soup, I kept my tone casual like weather talk. He considered the hallway, then the sleeping baby. 5 minutes, he lifted his chin like a barrier. I stepped aside and let her slip through with grace. She hugged me long enough to read my heartbeat. Smells like victory, she joked for his benefit. He blew air through his nose and checked the clock. I tilted my head toward the bedroom and she understood. Walk her while we plate, she reached for the stroller straps. He put a hand out like a traffic cop. Germs outside, he forced a smile that didn't climb his cheeks. I angled the stroller anyway and tapped my watch twice. Spit up streaked his shirt and he cursed under breath. He pinched the fabric and backed toward the bathroom. 2 minutes, he tossed over his shoulder with false calm. The door shut and water roared like a cover. We moved fast. Passport in the wrap, cash redistributed, backup key secured. She tucked a tiny flash drive under the bassinet pad. I breathed through a spike of fear and kept going. He returned with wet hair and a new shirt. Timer, he lifted his phone and squared his shoulders. My sister dabbed at a spot on the stroller bar. Walk around the floor, she offered, voice soft and practical. He blocked the doorway with casual stance turned rigid. Too windy, he argued, eyes flicking to our hands. I lifted the baby and she sighed into my collarbone. He recalibrated and chose a different rule to enforce. Weigh in now, he tapped the floor like a starter pistol. I stepped up and watched the number hold steady. His eyebrow twitched and the vein at his temple ticked. I memorized both like timestamps for later. Photo for accountability, he raised the phone one-handed. My sister drifted into frame with an easy smile. Let me get angles that flatter, she chirped like a stylist. She tilted the device and snapped 6, then 7. I coughed once and shifted my stance toward the door. The baby's lower lip trembled and then steadied. He reached to adjust the wrap and I pivoted away. A tiny gasp escaped him and he masked it with a grin. Class at 7, I reminded, eyes never leaving his face. He scanned me for weakness and found none offered. Don't be late, he flicked the magnet board with annoyance. The click landed like a countdown I was ready to hear. He opened the fridge and rummaged like a judge sorting files. My sister tapped her nail on the counter to mark time. I pulled a shaker from the dish rack and fumbled the lid. Liquid splashed his sleeve and he froze mid-snarl. Go change, she urged, already lifting the stroller handles. He hesitated, then stalked back to the bedroom with short steps. The moment his shadow disappeared, we moved in silence. I slid my phone under the couch and powered it loud. She placed her own phone on the table face up. A map app glowed with a route to the station. I traced the turns with my finger until they stuck. We looked at the door and listened for footsteps. He came out calmer, hair flattened, temper reset by habit. "Run the stairs," he ordered, not looking at either of us. "I'll warm up with her," my sister offered breezily. He weighed the idea and handed over the diaper pouch. They circled the hallway while I stood on the threshold. I watched their backs and timed the loop. He returned first and blocked me from following. "Focus, no distractions." He folded his arms like a gate. I dropped into squats, counting out loud to anchor control. He hovered a breath away, eyes scanning for collapse. My legs burned and steadied, and then burned again. He leaned closer, hungry for a flinch I wouldn't give. My sister reappeared, cheeks flushed, stroller angled toward the exit. "Baby's out," she whispered, a tiny triumph wrapped in normal. He nodded, almost pleased that a routine existed. He grabbed his keys and tossed, testing my reflex. I snatched them midair and laughed once. He bristled and waited for me to explain the laugh. "Grips back," I said, flexing my fingers like a prizefighter. He swallowed irritation and looked at the door instead. "Errand," he announced, grabbing his wallet and slipping on shoes. "Half an hour," he aimed the line at the ceiling. I placed the keys on the table and kept my face smooth. He scooped them again and smiled with teeth. The door shut, the lock turned, silence arrived like a drumbeat. I moved to the couch and retrieved my decoy phone. Notifications stacked across the screen like bait. I left it buzzing and picked up the spare from the diaper bag. My sister texted a single emoji that looked like forward motion. I answered with a thumb and the number 30. She replied with a location pinned 2 blocks west. I felt my lungs expand in a way that hurt. I opened his fitness app on the spare and scrolled. A new feature flashed bright, partner tracking enabled. He had paired our accounts during breakfast without asking. I stared at the blinking icon and felt the ground tilt. I killed Bluetooth with a hard press and then airplane mode. The tracker spun and lost its tether, searching the room. I tucked the spare under the couch beside the decoy. Let him watch the wrong dot while I moved. Shoes on, wrapped tight, cash against my ribs. I cracked the door as the elevator dinged somewhere below. A neighbor stepped out with a laundry basket and a raised brow. "Hold the door," I asked, voice steady like a held note. She propped it with her hip and didn't ask questions. "Long night," she murmured, eyes flicking to my wrist. Long enough, I pushed the stroller through the gap. The elevator opened and swallowed the pause between choices. The doors slid shut and I hit the ground floor button. My reflection looked like a person I recognized fully. A buzz rattled the decoy upstairs and then again. He was calling the wrong phone while I dropped into motion. The lobby camera winked and I lifted my chin at it. Proof would meet us later if anyone argued. I stepped into the street and the wind hit hard. I turned west and didn't look back for an answer. I pushed into the wind and tightened the wrap. Traffic surged and cut the crosswalk mid-count. I waited, knees soft, ready to spring. A bus roared past and I moved the instant it cleared. 2 blocks west, a rideshare idled with hazards blinking. My sister lifted a hand from the passenger seat. I jogged the stroller across broken pavement and kept pace. The driver popped the trunk and kept his face neutral. Seat installed, my sister slid out and clicked the base fast. She mouthed later and kissed the baby's forehead. I transferred her in with hands that finally obeyed me. The driver checked mirrors and asked for our destination. Station, I climbed in and shut the door hard. My sister climbed behind me and held my shoulder. The driver eased into traffic without commentary or small talk. I watched the mirrors and kept my breathing steady. My phone upstairs vibrated again and again in my head. He would notice the dead tracker and the silence. He would choose bluster or charm depending on audience. Either way, he would move fast, faster than before. The driver slowed at an intersection blocked by a delivery truck. A horn blared 3 times and then died off. I counted to 20 and checked the mirror again. A familiar silhouette turned the corner 2 blocks back. Go around, my voice came sharp enough to startle. The driver nodded once and cut through a side street. My sister squeezed my arm and whispered, "Hold." I held and pictured the lobby camera, storing my last look. We reached a pharmacy with wide glass and constant traffic. "Stop here," I grabbed the handle and jumped out. Inside, I found the clerk with the careful eyes. "Print footage?" I asked, sliding cash across the counter. She glanced at my wrist bruise and nodded once. She turned a small monitor and scrubbed back 30 minutes. There I was, waved to lens, stroller tight to me. She hit capture and loaded a flash drive with the clip. Timestamp locked, she tucked the drive into a tiny pouch. Footsteps clattered outside and someone shouted my name. My skin tightened and my heart tried to climb. I thanked her and moved fast and quiet. He strode past the window with his phone held high. He scanned for me like a hunter without patience. I ducked behind a cardboard display and counted breaths. He paused, listened, then powered forward toward the corner. I slipped out the side exit and signaled the driver. He rolled forward 2 spaces to open the curb. My sister opened the rear door and waved me low. We piled in and the driver merged without hesitation. "Lose him," she placed a crisp bill on the console. He nodded and took 3 quick turns in sequence. My stomach floated for a heartbeat and then dropped. I looked back and saw nothing I could name. Traffic thinned and the station roofline appeared ahead. I felt an urge to cry that I tamped down. The baby stirred, then relaxed against the padding. I touched her toes and counted to 5. "Different entrance," my sister pointed to a side gate. The driver swung right and coasted near the auxiliary lot. I stepped out with the pouch and the cash. 10 minutes, I told them, forcing my knees to unlock. The guard at the side door raised an eyebrow. "Domestic," I said, and lifted my wrist without shaking. He pressed a buzzer and waved us through the metal frame. I walked down a corridor that smelled like bleach and nerves. A desk sergeant looked up with tired curiosity. "Video first," I offered, pushing the pouch across to him. He plugged in and watched the clip without blinking. "Statement next," he said, tapping a single form. I filled lines with dates and exact phrases I remembered. He watched my hand like the truth lived in the pen. A printer chattered and produced a copy for me. He slid a card over and circled a number twice. "He might call," the sergeant warned, tone dry and direct. "Record everything," he added, pushing a small device forward. I tucked it into the wrap beside the cash. He stood and signaled a colleague to escort me out. We reached the sidewalk and the wind tore across again. My sister paced near the car and scanned the street. She saw me and the relief hit her like a wave. "Shelter next," she said, already opening the door. The driver glanced at the station behind us and nodded. He pulled into traffic with smooth, practiced movement. My phone in the apartment must have been screaming now. I pictured him dialing friends, building a story I would break. A message pinged on my sister's screen with a new angle. A photo of me at the park loop earlier, shared by him. Caption: "Accountability Queen." Like stacked beneath like witnesses I hadn't invited. I felt anger heat my neck and then cool. Public performance meant he assumed control of the narrative. The clip in my wrap revised that script completely. I leaned back and let that thought harden. The driver spoke up for the first time. 3 blocks till the address you sent," his eyes held mine. "Any tail?" he asked, checking the mirrors again. "Not now," I answered, leaving room for yet. We rolled past a thrift shop and a closed diner. My sister squeezed my fingers and whispered almost. The baby yawned and settled deeper in the seat. I let my shoulders drop 1 inch, then lifted them again. A patrol car idled at the curb near a brick building. The driver slowed and flicked his eyes toward the entrance. A woman with a lanyard stepped out and scanned our plates. She waved us forward and held the door against the gusts. Inside the foyer, a volunteer looked me over quickly. "Intake now," she said, voice brisk and kind. I handed her the card from the sergeant. She read it and nodded like something aligned. "Any injuries on the child?" her question cut clean. No, I said and waited for the next hurdle. Any weapon? S in the vehicle, her eyes didn't rise. No, I lifted my hands and they steadied. She led us to a small desk with a laminated sheet. House rules, she started, keeping it simple and strict. Curfew, no visitors unannounced, location confidential always. I signed without flinching and felt my spine lengthen. Room 4, she handed me a key on a blue band. I slid it over my wrist and felt a pulse settle. My sister exhaled and rested her forehead against mine. Call when you land, she whispered, already backing away. The driver stayed in the lobby while we hugged hard. He lifted a hand in a respectful goodbye. I pressed bills into his palm and added a thank you. He shook his head and tucked the money back. We climbed a short flight and reached a quiet hallway. My new door waited with a number stenciled Klein. I opened it and stepped into a space without his rules. I looked at the crib and felt my chest unlock. The volunteer pointed to a wall phone near the bed. If he shows up here, we call immediately. I nodded and placed the pouch and the device on the table. She pointed to a lockbox and I understood the routine. Downstairs, my sister texted one last time. He's posting again, he's spinning. I typed back 3 words that tasted like metal. I am done. A knock from staff interrupted the moment and tightened the air. Officer on line 2 for you. The volunteer held the receiver. I took it and braced for the next step. Ready to record, a calm voice said, he's calling your phone now. I lifted the receiver and braced for impact. Put her on, his voice hit fast and hard through static. The officer on line 2 murmured ready, and I nodded once. I pressed the speaker button and let the recorder catch everything. You ran, paper rustled on his end like he paced. Come home now, a sharp breath, then a forced chuckle. Or I start visiting friends, he let the last word hang. My grip tightened and the officer whispered, hold the line. Where are you? His tone swung sweet, then sour in a blink. I'm feeding our kid, I said, steady enough to write in ink. He groaned and called me dramatic for effect and momentum. The recorder's light blinked, hungry for each push and threat. Bring her back and we reset, he scraped the desk with something. I'll coach you, we'll get you presentable by summer. The nurse in the doorway raised her eyebrows at that word. I swallowed the laugh and let silence underline the insult. This door is locked, I kept my voice flat and unhurried. Your access ended this afternoon, a long pause followed my sentence. He hissed like a tire losing air and then regrouped. You're embarrassing me, he snapped, finally saying the quiet part. The officer cut in softly, ask if he'll meet tomorrow. Pick up essentials, I repeated, making it sound like my idea. He leapt at the chance to control the stage again. Morning alone, no cops, he tried to make it a command. Supervised only, I watched the nurse brace at the door. Public location, 10 sharp, I named the grocery parking lot. He laughed once and called me ridiculous for adding conditions. The officer mouthed perfect and scribbled the time on a pad. You think this shelter keeps you safe forever, his voice dropped. I know these streets, a slap sounded like a hand on wood. Show up without a handler or I share those photos. The officer gestured to keep him talking and I let him brag. Which photos? I asked it like I hadn't seen the posts. The fitness ones, your belly, the befores, he enjoyed the word. The nurse's jaw tightened and she whispered, we have this. I steadied myself on the desk and let the rage cool. You post me again and the clip goes wide, I breathed slow. He scoffed and called bluff like a gambler chasing heat. Try me, I said, then named the precinct and the sergeant. The line went white noise quiet for 3 clean beats. He regrouped with sugar, baby needs a father, he cleared his throat. You're tired, you're confused, the script sagged on her new weight. She needs safety, I answered, mouth dry, back straight. He muttered a curse and agreed to the location anyway. Wear something flattering, he tried one last jab for sport. Or don't, I like an arc, he exhaled and the call ended. The recorder stopped and the officer murmured, got him twice. I set the receiver down and felt my legs shake. The nurse handed me water and a checklist printed fast. Overnight pack documentation, contacts you trust, short lines, clear boxes. I ticked each item with deliberate strokes that calmed me. A staff member noted the meeting time and posted the plan. We moved to the common room for a quick prep talk. 2 advocates with you, the supervisor confirmed, eyes unwavering. Marked unit nearby, body cams live, she tapped her clipboard. Her certainty steadied the part of me still listening for footsteps. My sister called on the shelter phone, voice clipped and fierce. "What?" "He's deeming people about your episode," keys clacked in the background. "I've saved everything," she promised, breath hitching, then steady again. "Be there tomorrow with copies," I said, staring at the door. The baby stirred and fussed, and I swayed on instinct. A staffer rolled in a bassinet and checked the latch twice. "Sleep if you can," she dimmed noise near our corner. I lay down and felt the hours press their weight. Dreams stayed away, lists replaced them and marched in order. Meet film, retrieve what matters, leave Klein. I rehearsed responses and practiced breathing through surprise. If he veered, I would not chase his curve. At dawn, a volunteer knocked and offered a granola bar. I ate half and tucked the rest in my pocket. The nurse checked the baby's temperature with quick, gentle hands. "Ready when you are," she said, planting her feet. The advocates arrived wearing neutral jackets and firm expressions. "We'll walk beside you," one promised, voice low and practical. "Keep your chin level, let us speak first." I nodded and zipped my coat with slow, precise motions. Outside, a patrol car idled a block away per protocol. We stepped into the street in a tight triangle. I heard a mailbox clang and jerked, then breathed out. The baby slept, trusting me to keep the beat steady. We reached the lot at 9:58 with room to think. Carts rattled in the distance and a truck hissed to stop. I positioned near the entry camera like the officer advised. The advocates flanked me and checked their phones for updates. He pulled in at 10:03 with the smile he used for gatherings. He lifted a shopping bag like a peace offering. One advocate raised a palm and stood between us. He pivoted, playing to the imaginary audience in his head. "Let's make this quick," his gaze flicked to my midsection. "I brought your health plan," he added, enjoying the emphasis. He reached to pass the bag, and the advocate shook her head. "Place it down," she instructed, calm as a surgeon. He crouched, remained there a beat too long, then stood. "Take her home and we reset," he wheedled, voice syrup thick. I stared at the ground because eye contact would feed him. The patrol car turned the corner and he swallowed a curse. I opened the bag and found documents and a tracker device. He watched my hands and tried to hide the flicker of panic. I held it up between 2 fingers for the body cams. "Aren't those illegal?" One advocate's eyebrow arched like a blade. He backpedaled with a sloppy laugh that fooled no one. "It monitors steps," he claimed, glancing at the police unit. The officers stepped out and asked him to wait by his car. He obeyed, lips pressed thin, calculating his next move. The sergeant from yesterday emerged from the passenger seat. "Good morning," he greeted me, tone calm but ready. "Anything else in there that pings?" He indicated the bag. I dug deeper and found a second device taped under a flap. The sergeant photographed it and nodded to his partner. "Thanks for bringing this public," he said for the record. "We'll log everything before he edits himself again." I exhaled and felt my shoulders finally drop an inch. "Do you want to collect clothes and medications today?" The advocate asked it like a switch being flipped. "Yes," I answered, hearing steel in my own voice. "With escort and a time limit," she added, meeting my eyes. The sergeant returned to him and laid out terms. "Supervised access only, no speech beyond logistics." His jaw flexed and the smile cracked around the edges. He nodded and unlocked his car like it might bite. We caravanned to the building with the squad behind us. I climbed the stairs with one advocate while the other waited below. My hands shook but my steps held, measured and sure. The key turned and the door swung inward like a stage. I entered first and moved straight to the bedroom. A timer beeped on the oven, though no one used it. He drifted in the doorway, watched by an officer. 20 minutes, the advocate reminded, tapping her watch. I packed quickly and left anything he could later claim. Birth records, prescriptions, 2 outfits, the flash drive's twin. He hovered as close as he dared under the cameras. Every breath he took landed on my shoulder like ash. At the dresser, he reached for a small box I recognized. "Mine," I said without raising my voice even a notch. He lifted his hands and backed up a half step. The officer's body cam hummed and caught the retreat. In the kitchen, he tried a last ambush with a whisper. "You're not built for single-mother games," his smile sharpened. "I was built for survival," I answered, surprised by the truth. He flinched and looked away like light hurt. We carried the bags out while he performed calm for the hallway. The neighbor peeked through a crack and caught my eye. She nodded once, then closed her door without a click. Witnesses were stacking themselves whether he liked it or not. Downstairs, the sergeant handed me a small envelope. "Temporary order signed this morning," he explained, clipped and clear. "Violations go straight to cuffs," he added, eyes steady. I slid it into my pocket and felt a pulse return. At the curb, I buckled my daughter in with practiced care. My sister texted a single word that hit like a match. "Ready?" I looked at the building one last time and didn't blink. The officer opened the patrol car door for him to wait. He smiled for the roof camera and adjusted his collar. The act looked smaller in daylight and under rules. I turned away and stepped into the car that faced forward. The patrol car's lights flashed outside the shelter gate, no siren. A staffer waved me to the office phone with urgency. "Violation reported near your building," the sergeant's voice came crisp. "We need a statement now before we move." The clock felt loud. I tightened the carrier straps and headed downstairs fast. 2 advocates fell in beside me, steps matched and steady. We passed the sign-in desk and hit the sidewalk together. A cruiser rolled up and the rear door swung open like a cue. "He parked within the restricted zone," the younger officer briefed. "Filmed your window and spoke to a neighbor," his jaw tensed. I nodded once and opened the folder I kept ready. Screenshots, timestamps, the video from the pharmacy loaded quick. The sergeant reviewed the clip on a body cam display. "Good, this undercuts his public performance," he said without ceremony. "Do you want to press the additional count today?" "Yes," I answered, hearing my voice hold without tremor. We drove to the precinct with the bass of traffic beneath us. The advocate across from me checked a list and breathed slow. The baby slept through every speed bump like a tiny metronome. I watched the skyline flicker past in rehearsed clean lines. Inside, the detective from intake slid a form across. "Harassment plus violation," he summarized, pen balanced between fingers. "Any contact since yesterday not through counsel." I shook my head and pushed the phone logs forward. He scanned, clicked save, and printed copies for my file. "Arraignment likely tomorrow," he added, eyes on the monitor. "We'll notify you if transport occurs sooner." I signed and felt something unclench under my ribs. We stepped back into the hall and my sister called. "He's posting again," she warned, breath quick. "He tagged your gym with a before-after collage," keys clacked. "Report it," I said, "every account, every comment, don't engage." The advocate held the door while I buckled the carrier. "We can get you a temporary phone," she offered gently. "Fresh number, limited contacts, safer routing." "Do it," I said, already discarding the old device like a skin. At the shelter, a nurse met us with a portable scale. "Baby check," she explained, hands efficient and calm. The numbers settled within the safe range and relief softened me. "Your vitals next," she said, and I mouthed okay through a breath. The supervisor called from the doorway with a raised finger. "Legal aid at 2, she announced, schedule firm. "Bring documentation and the flash drive." I gathered the stack and felt the plan grip. The attorney met us in a small room with glass. "Emergency custody petition," he said, opening a laptop. "We'll ask for supervised visitation and no digital contact." He typed while I recounted the threat lines word for word. "Any direct proof of tracking?" His question landed precise. I placed the devices on a paper towel like evidence. He photographed each, then their serial numbers, then my hands. Good chain, he said. Judges notice when survivors prepare. We filed electronically, and he printed a stamped copy. Hearing by video at 4, he continued, scanning email. Judge assigned, opposing counsel notified already. My pulse kicked once, then steadied under the table. The screen flickered to life at 4:02 precisely. The judge appeared framed by shelves in quiet authority. Opposing counsel's square popped in with polite impatience. My attorney nodded to me and unmuted with measured pace. Petitioner present with child, he began, voice even and spare. He presented the clip, the tracker photos, the parking report. Opposing counsel lifted a hand and tried to spin routine. The judge's eyebrow rose and the spin died midair. Temporary custody granted to petitioner, the judge ruled carefully. No contact except through counsel, surrender of devices ordered. A gavel tapped once off screen like a heartbeat finishing. The screen went dark and the room exhaled at last. My sister texted a meme that made me snort. I wiped my eyes and laughed harder than was polite. The advocate cracked a grin and handed me tissues. I let the moment pass, then straightened for what came next. The sergeant called as we packed up the paperwork. Units have him stopped, he reported, tone clipped. Probable cause on the monitoring. Devices. He paused. Do you want to be notified at booking? Yes, I answered, throat tight and clear. Notify by text only, the advocate added, leaning closer. Victim privacy needs guarding through every stage. Understood, he said. You'll have a case number by evening. We ate in the common room with other women listening softly. No one asked for details, and I didn't volunteer flourishes. A toddler toddled over and stared at my sleeping daughter. They blinked at each other and the room thawed an inch. Staff gathered us for a short safety reset. Doors locked, the supervisor said, curfew unchanged, escorts available. She looked at me last and nodded like we'd crossed a river. We'll rotate checks tonight until the adrenaline fades. At dusk, legal aid pinged with a document to sign. I scrawled my name and returned the tablet promptly. Tomorrow we begin the long work, the message read. I closed my eyes and let that sentence settle. The sergeant's text landed at 8:11 sharp. In custody, arraignment set, no bail requested by defense. My knees softened and then held. I typed thank you and placed the phone face down. I walked to the hallway kitchenette and filled a cup. The water hummed through the pipes and steadied my breath. I leaned against the counter and watched my hands stop shaking. Behind me, a woman hummed to her child and time resumed. Back in our room, I unzipped the overnight bag without noise. I laid out pajamas and a fresh onesie with practiced efficiency. My daughter stretched and let out a tiny complaint. I met her eyes and felt a clean current run through me. Sleep would be light but possible. Tomorrow would be paper and calls and small victories. The heavy thing I carried had already started to slip away. I gripped the edge of the crib and let it drop.